Hi, welcome. In this video, I'm going to go over the final exam review. So let's get started. The first thing I want to point out is in the assignment section, you will see the assignment section should align with your um, syllabus and the percentages that everything is worth. So I will be doing another video in which I go over assignment 0 and what was covered in the class and just going through the code of assignment 0. So that will be the next video I will be doing after this. But first, I just wanted to do a quick video with an overview for the final exam. You'll see here that you have your assignments and those have all been graded, and all students seem to be doing very well on the assignments overall. So my recommendation in preparation for the final exam would be to review your assignments, go back, recode some of it. You should really have a great understanding of all the code. This is a cumulative subject. Inheritance will not be on the final exam, so focus on assignments 1 through 8. You will also see here that the quizzes, if you go here so where I went here, I just went to assignments and then I made sure that I showed by type. And the quizzes, you have the 2 lowest quiz grades will be dropped in the final calculation of your grade. And then you have your midterm exam and your final exam, which both require lockdown browser with the webcam. So you've already done that on your midterm. So make sure that I think the practice is still open. You can practice again if you need to. So be sure that you are ready to go and that make that you plan accordingly for this final exam. Here on the syllabus page, the date of the final exam has been posted since the first week of class. So the final exam will be on August 1st. It will be available from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and it will close promptly at 10 p.m. So if you start it at 9 p.m., you will only have 1 hour. I have not made the final exam yet. I haven't even done the questions yet. So I'm just have made the review. Every semester I make new questions for the final exam. So now let's take a look at the final exam review. There are some documents here. It's set up just the same as the midterm review. So it's 25% of your grade, just like the midterm. Due to the cumulative nature of the class, if you earn a better score on your final than on your midterm, your final exam and could count as your midterm exam. So it doesn't go the other way. It only goes if you get a higher score on your final exam. Now, keep in mind that you are expected to work alone on your final exam. You are not expected to get help from another person or from AI, and it is considered cheating if you do not do your own work on your final exam. So AI is not allowed. You are expected to work alone. I believe it's not written here, but I'm going to add that to make sure that you guys are fully aware of that. So we have an outline document, another outline document, and some sample questions. My recommendation would be to try the sample questions, and then there are sample solutions to go with the sample questions. I'm not going to go over that in this video. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the questions. The type of questions that could be on here would be like similar to the midterm, small pieces of code. I do pay attention, I don't take off for the same semicolons over and over and over again, but you should, you do have time to take the test and write the code in the best way possible. Try to include semicolons on statements and, curly braces, of course, in C++ are very important, but I do know that there's not time to test it. The reason I don't make a test there's a couple of things. I don't make a fully multiple choice test because there's no way to evaluate partial, understanding of concepts when everything is either right or wrong in a multiple choice test. So that's why I give you essay questions, fill in the blank, small pieces of code, things like that. I also don't have you use a compiler on the final and the midterm because the final and the midterm are both timed, and hopefully by now you've spent a lot of time on your compiler and can see how time can go by very quickly when you are using a compiler. And I don't want students to be stuck on one question trying to test it in their compiler, and then there's 4 more questions they didn't even get to because there wasn't enough time. You have all the time you need to do your assignments, work on your assignments, write the code for your assignments, run them in the compiler, test, make changes. You have um, all that time up until when this assignments are posted until the due date to use the compiler. I recommend again going through your programming assignments in preparation for the final exam and reviewing that code. So let's look at the topics that will be on the final exam. All right, so these are the topics. Everything that was on the midterm will be on the final exam. So if you scroll down on this document, this was the midterm exam topics. So we'll just start here using, you can assume for this that there'll be pound include IO stream, pound include string, pound include C type, CC type for 2 upper and 2 lower, pound include F stream for functions. I will go through and make sure that I put at the top of your test, obviously, that it's an individual exam, that you can't work with another person, that you can't work with AI, and that you can assume um, all of the libraries that we've used on the assignments will be included. So I will put that at the top of your exam the same way I did on your midterm. And you can also assume using namespace standard. So there's no reason for you to use the STD with the scope resolution operator in your exam questions. As a matter of fact, I don't want you to use that because that's not how we've been doing the assignments all semester. All semester, we've been using a global standard namespace statement using namespace standard. So I expect you to use that also on your final exam. You will need to know how to do functions, function prototypes, function reference functions, pass by value functions, uh, data types, int, char, double, and bool, complex, strings, structs, how to use the dot operator, classes, how to define a class, how to make a constructor, a default constructor, explicit value constructor. This is from the first exam. How to make mutator functions, how to make accessor functions, how to make private public member functions and private member variables. Also, it's not listed here, but you should know how to do a class declaration, how to make the class declaration separate from the implementation, how to use the scope resolution operator for member functions, how to do an explicit value constructor, and also how to do friend functions. But that's going to be at the top because this is the section that was from the this is the section from the first test. So private member variables, all of this, how to write expressions. Anyway, I'm not really worried on your exam on dealing with decimal places. I don't expect you to have to worry about manipulating the output because you're not going to have time to test it anyway. Call by reference versus call by value parameters, and how to write loops, how to do multiple if else's. If you're using switches, there's not going to be any specific questions about switch versus if else, but you should know how to do alternatives in your code, change of flow, CN and cout, obviously, functions. This is object parameters, object reference parameters, constant object reference parameters, functions who return an object, a struct or a class now, uh, and how to write a main program. There's some simple questions like that, how to demonstrate understanding of function calls, how to write loops. Playing computer means reading some code and explaining what the output might be. So that's all from the first midterm. And now if we go up here, other topics that will be on the final, in addition to what was on the midterm, pointers and arrays. dynamic arrays, reading from a file. So we had all of that. We did not do file output, so I wouldn't put that on your test, but we have had a few assignments where you have to read from a file, so you should know how to read from a file. You should know how to use new for dynamic arrays and delete to free up the dynamic array. You should know how to declare a static array. We've used those. You should know how to keep a count of how many elements are in your partially filled array. You should know how to pass an array to a function. You should know how to pass one element of an array to a function, meaning the indexed variable of an array to a function. How to search an array. So all of that was not on the midterm and is added topics for the final exam. C strings and C++ strings. We spent way more time on C++ strings, but you should understand that strings are still stored as a character array with the null character. You should understand how to use CC type to individually change each character in an array to uppercase or to lowercase. We did use, I believe we used the string length function, but if we didn't use I will go through, and if we didn't use C style, any C style any C style string member functions, then I will just spend more time with questions on C++ strings. We did use the length function on C++ strings. We did have an array of strings in one of your assignments. We had reversing a character array or reversing a string, searching through a character array. We used the functions begin, end. We use size and length, size or length. You can use either of those. We did not have an assignment where you cleared or emptied a string. I'm aware of that. So that being said, most likely you won't have any. I'm going to really look at the assignments that you've been working on all semester for ideas for your questions. Using getLine to get an entire phrase. So we did that. We used algorithm and the reverse function to reverse a string. So we did have assignment on that. I'm aware that we did not have a vector assignment. So there's not much chance that you will have a question using vectors. I just left this on here because maybe if we do have any questions with vectors or templates, they might be multiple choice questions. I won't put any coding questions on templates or vectors because I didn't give you an assignment that uses template or vectors. But I wanted to keep this here because I did want to review it. It's also an assignment 0. So when I go over the assignment 0, I am going to review and go over vectors with you. Not everything has to be about what's on your exam. It also has to be about what you've learned and what we've covered in the class. Everything, it's not possible to make assignments with absolutely everything that's been covered in this class. So I do expect you to understand about vectors, and I will go over that when I go over assignment 0 in the next video. We had using the dot operator for classes, how to use the scope resolution operator for member functions, the difference between private and public member variables, private and public member functions. We've really stressed using private variables and public member functions. We use accessor and mutator functions for our private member variables. You should know how to use those. Accessors are called getter functions, usually with a get. Mutators are called setter functions, usually with a set. We did some friend functions in one of your assignments. You had to overload the plus operator, and we had to overload a relational operator, so you should know how to do that. You should know definitely how to separate the class declaration from the implementation of the class functions. So you did have an assignment where you had to do separate compilation. Obviously, that's difficult to, do in a timed exam, but you still can separate the declaration, which means like the prototypes for the function from the function implementation. And when you separate that, go back and look through the assignments and the expectations of the assignments. You use the scope resolution operator for the member functions. You do not use the scope resolution operator for friend functions, but you do list the friend function prototypes in the class so that the friend functions have access to the private member variables. So that's an overview of the topics for the exam. So let's go to the next document, which I made a document that goes through each assignment. And I think that this is, good for you to go back and take a look at what topics were covered in each assignment. And assignment 0, I'm going to make a separate document and a separate video. But for assignment 1, we had just a basic data types, input and output, and declaring variables, a simple interactive program. Assignment 2, we used conditions, loops, and void functions. Void functions are, when you call them, they are statements. They don't return anything. A non-void function is an expression when it's called because you need to capture what's being returned. You should understand that. How to change the flow of your program using conditions. We have 3 different types of loops: while loops, do while loops, and for loops. You should know how to write them, but I won't ask you for a specific loop. I will just ask you to, if the question says continues to do this or goes through an array or does this until you get some input or does something a certain number of times, then you should know to use a loop for that. Mathematical expressions using input and output, a yes or no loop, pass by value and pass by reference parameters. This is all from assignment 2. Then on assignment 3, we practice separate compilation. The biggest thing to get from this in preparation for your final is how to have your function prototypes separate from your function definitions. So the .h would contain the prototypes, which go above main. Then you have your main function, which is the driver. And then if you're all in one file, the function definitions would go below main. So you just need this assignment, as far as the separate compilation goes, was just to reiterate how you separate the different features of the program, the implementation from the prototypes. And obviously, we won't do separate compilation on the exam, but you should still know how to use parameters, pass by value parameters, pass by reference functions, pass by reference parameters in your functions, and constant reference parameters in your functions. We have void functions. You can have int functions, double functions, char functions, bool functions, functions that return objects, which we didn't get to yet. So in assignment 3, we only had some integer functions. We used math and we used loops and conditions. Then in assignment 4, we used structs with file input. So you should know how to read from a file. The questions may say to assume that the file connected okay. So if you assume that the file connected okay, you don't have to go through, error checking for and not connecting to the file. Also, you don't have to go through error checking for the wrong data in the file. Also on the test, if the test just asks for a function definition, that's all I want. I don't want the prototype, the definition, the main, everything. I don't want a complete program. I just want, if I ask you to write a function definition, just write the function definition. If I ask you to write a main function with a function call, just write a main function with a function call. Please read the questions carefully and don't give more than what is asked for. All right, so question 4, we started to use structs and file input. On assignment 5, we started to design classes in C++. So you had accessor and mutator functions. You had a default constructor, an explicit value constructor. We had private member variables so that you needed to use your accessor and mutator functions. And we practiced writing programmer-defined functions that used the accessor and mutator functions. Then that is all before the midterm. Then after the midterm, we had 6, 7, 8, and 9. You will notice here that 9 is not listed because I said that inheritance will not be on your exam, not that it's not important. So you should still work on assignment 9 and understand inheritance. Is just not going to put any questions on inheritance on your final exam. So again, in assignment 6, we used arrays, dynamic arrays, looping through arrays, printing array elements, searching arrays, and we also used reading from a file. In assignment 7, we used C++ strings or character arrays, so you should understand how that works. That even if they're strings and you use the string class, they are still character arrays that end with a null character. We used dynamic string arrays. We had a dynamic integer arrays. We reversed arrays and we searched through arrays. We also used characters and their ASCII values. We went character by character and changed them to uppercase. We used getLine to get a phrase. So you should understand how to use all of those features in the C++ language. And then assignment 8, we used friend functions, so you should understand how to use friend functions. We also used member functions. We use accessor and mutator functions, but in addition, we added another member function. We use a constructor, default constructor, explicit value constructor. You don't need to do separate compilation, but you should understand again how to separate the declaration from the member function implementation that uses the scope resolution operator. So this is an overview of what I'm going to look at to plan the questions for your final exam. And I have one more document here, and this last document is some sample questions. So these are some sample questions. My recommendation is to read through these sample questions and try to answer them. So there are 14 sample questions. So if you see an error in these sample questions, please let me know. I'm not going to go through these questions because I don't want to read them to you. I want you to try to read them and interpret them and understand them, and then go to you can take a look here, and there are sample solutions. Obviously, your sample solution does not need to match my sample solution, but I want to just reiterate that when you are doing any questions on the exam, so if this asks for a bool function and the name of it is get words, then I expect your answer to have a function definition with a bool return type named get words. I don't want you to give me the main function. I don't want you to give me anything extra. I want only the function definition. I don't want you to use std if you have input and output. So you have to declare, ask, and get things from the user. I don't want you to be using the scope resolution operator with std because we've been using namespace standard globally in all of our programs throughout the semester, so there's no reason for you to be using that on your final exam. Some of these also are just short answer questions, so there could be short answer questions on your exam. So take a look at these. They're still essay questions, but they're short answer. You also might have some multiple choice questions on your exam or true false. So the exam could have a bunch of different types of questions. So just be prepared for that. That might not all be just writing code questions. So hopefully this gives you a little overview for your final exam. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.